Dear students, in this lecture, we are going to discuss the challenges which UN faces while implementing human rights. We will also try to understand the strategies which UN should adopt to overcome these challenges for its effective role in promoting and implementing human rights worldwide. First, we will try to understand what is human rights implementation. Dear students, human rights implementation refers to the process of translating the principles, the standards which were outlined in international human rights instruments such as treaties, conventions, and declarations into concrete actions, into concrete policies and practices at the national, regional, and international levels. It involves the adoption of legal frameworks, institutional mechanisms, and practical measures to ensure the realization, protection, promotion of human rights for all individuals without any discrimination. After understanding the meaning of implementing human rights, we will try to understand the importance of effective implementation for human rights protection. The effective implementation of human rights is crucial for ensuring the protection, promotion, and realization of human rights and dignity for all individuals worldwide. There are many reasons which highlight the importance of effective implementation for global human rights protection. Firstly, effective implementation translates international human rights standards into domestic laws, into domestic regulations, therefore providing legal protection and legal recourse for individuals whose rights are violated. This ensures that human rights are not just abstract principles but are enforceable rights with strong remedies. Implementation mechanisms such as national human rights institutions, judicial systems also hold governments and other departments accountable for upholding human rights obligations. Accountability mechanisms also help to prevent human rights violations, to promote compliance with international standards, and to provide redress for victims of abuse. By addressing root causes of discrimination, inequality, and injustice, effective implementation helps us to prevent human rights violations before they can occur. Proactive measures such as education, awareness programs, and policy interventions contribute to creating a culture of respect for human rights and social inclusion. Effective implementation of human rights is also essential for the empowerment of individuals. When human rights are effectively implemented, individuals are empowered to claim, to exercise their rights. Access to information, legal remedies, and participation in decision making processes strengthen individuals' ability to challenge abuse of power, to challenge discrimination and marginalization. Effective implementation of human rights also promotes social justice by addressing structural inequalities and discrimination based on factors such as race, gender, ethnicity, religion, disability, or socio-economic status. Policies and programs aimed at promoting equality in education, healthcare, employment, and social services contribute to building more inclusive societies. Effective implementation of human rights is also essential for peace and stability. Respect for human rights is essential for maintaining peace and stability within and between nations. Societies that uphold human rights are less likely to experience conflict, violence, and social unrest. Human rights implementation contributes to the creation of stable and democratic societies where individuals can live in peace and security. Effective implementation of human rights also requires collaboration and cooperation among states, international organizations, civil society, and other stakeholders. International cooperation facilitates the exchange of best practices, technical assistance, and resources to address global human rights challenges collectively. There are many rights such as right to health, right to education, right to housing, right to work. These are interconnected with the sustainable development goals. So effective implementation of human rights also contribute to the achievement of the sustainable development goals by promoting inclusive and equitable development that leaves no one behind. So, dear students, we can say the effective implementation of human rights is very essential for advancing justice, equality, peace, and development on a global scale. By upholding human rights principles and obligations, governments, institutions, and individuals can contribute to create a world where every person can live with dignity, can live with freedom, can have respect for their inherent rights. Dear students, now we are going to discuss very briefly the role of United Nations in promoting human rights implementation. As you know, the UN plays a central role in promoting and overseeing the implementation of human rights worldwide through various mechanisms and bodies. For example, the United Nations develops and promotes international human rights standards through treaties, through declarations, through resolutions. As we all know that it has passed many resolutions for the protection, for the promotion of human rights like UDHR, ICCPR. So these declarations have set international standards for the human rights. The UN also monitors the human rights situation in different countries through mechanisms such as independent experts, treaty bodies. Entities conduct country visits, review reports submitted by member states, and issue recommendations to address human rights violations. The UPR is a unique mechanism which was established by the UN Human Rights Council to assess the human rights record of all member states. The UN has also established treaty bodies to monitor the implementation of specific human rights treaties such as ICCPR, ICESCR. These bodies review state reports, conduct inquiries, and issue recommendations to ensure compliance with treaty obligations. So, dear students, we can say that United Nations serves as a global forum and catalyst for advancing human rights principles, for promoting accountability and supporting efforts to create a world where the rights and dignity of all individuals are respected and protected. Dear students, though UN plays an important role in promoting and protecting human rights, but it also faces many challenges in this regard, like sovereignty and non interference. Respect for state sovereignty often prevents UN interventions in case of human rights violations within sovereign states. For example, the UN faces challenges in addressing human rights abuses in countries where governments invoke sovereignty to resist external scrutiny, external intervention. such as in the case of Myanmar's treatment of the Rohingya minority. Political interests and power among member states sometimes also influence UN actions on human rights issues. For example, the Security Council's veto power can impede decisive action on human rights violations in situations where powerful states have vested interests, as we have seen in the case of conflict in Syria. Another challenge is resource constraints. Means limited financial and human resources constrain the UN's capacity to effectively monitor and address human rights violations worldwide. For example, the UN's Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights faces challenges in adequately having good staff, good funding. Therefore, it affects the working of this office in conflict zones in those countries where there is a high human rights crisis. Lack of enforcement mechanisms. The absence of strong enforcement mechanisms also undermine the UN's ability to ensure compliance with human rights standards. For example, despite the existence of international human rights treaties, some states continue to violate human rights with impunity due to the lack of effective enforcement mechanisms such as sanctions or enforcement actions. Resistance from member states means some member states resist the UN's scrutiny, UN's intervention in their internal affairs, therefore hinder efforts to address human rights violations. For example, countries with poor human rights records may refuse to cooperate with UN investigations, may deny access to UN human rights bodies, or block resolutions which are critical of their human rights practices in UN forums. Another challenge is inadequate coordination and cooperation. Lack of coordination, lack of cooperation among UN agencies, regional organizations, and other stakeholders can also undermine efforts to address complex human rights challenges. For example, in humanitarian crisis, fragmented responses, divided responses from different UN agencies and NGOs can lead to duplication of efforts, gaps in assistance, and inefficiencies in addressing human rights violations. Weak accountability mechanisms and impunity for perpetrators of human rights abuses undermine trust in the UN's ability to deliver justice to victims. For example, despite evidence of war crimes and human rights violations, some individuals responsible for atrocities in conflict like in Syrian civil war, have not been held accountable due to political obstacles and lack of international consensus. Emerging challenges. Dear students, the UN also faces new and evolving human rights challenges, including those which are related to technology, climate change, and public health. For example, the proliferation of digital surveillance and online censorship poses challenges to the protection of freedom of expression and privacy, requiring therefore innovative responses from the UN and member states. So, dear students, it is clear from our discussion that while United Nations plays an important role in promoting and protecting human rights globally, it also faces numerous challenges in effectively implementing its mandate. These challenges range from issues of sovereignty and political considerations to resource constraints, lack of enforcement mechanisms, resistance from member states, coordination difficulties. Additionally, emerging challenges such as those related to technology, climate change, and public health further complicate the task. Now, the question is how UN can overcome these challenges and advance the cause of human rights worldwide. So, now we are going to discuss some of the strategies which UN can use to promote human rights globally. First is strengthening international cooperation. Means there's a need to enhance cooperation, collaboration among UN member states, regional organizations, and civil society actors to address human rights challenges collectively. For this, there's a need to promote dialogue and partnerships through multilateral forums, joint initiatives, and capacity building programs aimed at promoting human rights norms and values. Another important part of this strategy is to empower UN human rights mechanisms. Means there is a need to strengthen the capacity and independence of UN human rights bodies, such as Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and treaty monitoring bodies to effectively monitor and address human rights violations. For this, there's a need to provide adequate resources, including funding and staffing, to support the work of the UN human rights mechanisms and ensure their impartiality and effectiveness. Enhancing accountability mechanism. There's a need to develop and strengthen accountability mechanisms to hold states and perpetrators accountable for human rights violations. Promoting prevention and early warning systems. There is also the need to develop prevention focused approaches and early warning systems to identify, to address human rights violations before they can escalate into crisis. Mainstreaming human rights across UN agencies. There's a need to integrate human rights considerations into the policies, programs, and operations of all UN agencies and bodies. For this, there's a need to provide human rights training, capacity building support to UN staff to establish human rights focal points within agencies and ensure that human rights impact assessments are conducted for all UN initiatives. Leveraging technology and innovation. UN needs to harness technology and innovation to enhance the effectiveness of human rights monitoring, documentation, and advocacy efforts. Strengthening legal frameworks and compliance mechanisms. Means there's a need to strengthen international legal frameworks and compliance mechanisms to ensure that states fulfill their human rights obligations. Engaging with non-state actors. There is also need for the UN to promote dialogue and engagement with non-state actors, including businesses, civil society organizations, and local communities to protect, to promote respect for human rights. So, dear students, we can say that UN needs to adopt a comprehensive approach that involves strengthening international cooperation, empowering UN human rights mechanisms, enhancing accountability mechanisms, promoting prevention, mainstreaming human rights across UN agencies, leveraging technology, strengthening legal frameworks, and engaging with non-state actors is very essential for overcoming these challenges and for advancing the promotion and protection of human rights globally. By implementing these strategies effectively, the UN can play a more impactful role in promoting a world where human rights are respected, protected, and upheld for all individuals. So, dear students, in today's lecture, We have seen that the United Nations faces numerous challenges in effectively implementing its mandate to promote and protect human rights globally. These challenges include issue of sovereignty, political considerations, resource constraints, lack of enforcement mechanisms, resistance from member states, coordination difficulties, and emerging challenges such as those related to technology, climate change, and public health. However, by adopting comprehensive strategies such as strengthening international cooperation, empowering UN human rights mechanisms, enhancing accountability mechanisms, promoting prevention, mainstreaming human rights across all UN agencies, leveraging technology, strengthening legal frameworks, and engaging with non state actors. The UN can overcome these challenges and advance the cause of human rights worldwide. By doing so, the UN can play a more impactful role in promoting a world where human rights are respected, protected, and upheld for all individuals. Thank you.